Hello, welcome back to the Arturia Profit video series. Today we're going to do another deep dive, but before we do, I want to talk to you about something that I discovered very recently, which was that the LFO was tied to the modulation wheel, and I actually discovered it in deep dive number 1, verified it in deep dive number 2, and here I am in deep dive number 4, basically solving the actual mystery rather than the one that I thought I was solving. The LFO isn't tied to the modulation wheel. This is the same preset that I used to demonstrate the problem last time. Bizarrely, I mixed between two different sound sources. I don't know why I didn't just use the LFO. But if I move the modulation wheel, there was something wrong with that preset. The instance of the Profit VST had somehow been corrupted in that it was remembering previous states. I discovered this because whilst using the same preset and not deleting it and starting with a completely brand new track, I discovered wholly new idiosyncratic behaviour. It was tying the filter envelope to one of the LFO settings. It was basically just behaving very, very oddly indeed, and I deleted the track and added a new instance of the VST, and all of those problems went away. So there's a bug in there somewhere that causes it to remember past states and get very upset indeed, and you start seeing unusual behaviour like the modulation wheel being tied to the LFO. So all I can say to you is, if you ever see behaviour like that yourself, where a control seems to be operating independently or not how you would expect it to be, sadly, I think the solution is to actually delete the track that the VST instance is on and load yourself up a new instance of the Profit. Unfortunate, but there it is. Let's get on with the deep dive today, and we're going to talk about this setting here. So let's hear the sound, and then we'll deconstruct it. Madness, brilliant. So, lot going on. There's a lot going on in this sound. One thing that isn't doing a lot is the amplifier envelope. It's as simple as you like. It's on and it stays on until you let the key go, and then it fades away. Really nothing to talk about there. That's about the only thing that's simple in this sound. We have a filter envelope, and you can see that for 3 seconds it cuts frequencies away. This is the low pass filter, and then it lets them back out, and this is going to be our sustain point. I'll just accentuate this so that we can really hear it. Pull that down. So that was the filter operating. Bring it back up to there or thereabouts. But again, other than that, pretty straightforward stuff. The mixer envelope's on, and you know my VST's got zeros where all the labels should be. But basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have a loop oscillating between points 2 and 3, which is these two here. So after the joystick has done its attack phase and decay phase, it's going to sustain here until we release the key, and then it drifts away. I'll turn it off and we'll do it manually. I've got to get through the filter envelope. Okay, that's what it's doing. Let's hear that in action. bear in mind that the filter is also still operating on this sound, cutting this bit of frequency away. Then we have a pretty hefty modulation matrix, and the reason why I haven't taken the filter envelope away is because it's such a major component of the sound that if we get used to it being there, we can also hear its interaction with the other sounds. I don't really want to take it away completely, but I will turn the mixer envelope off so that we can go to manual mode and do that ourselves if we have to. Now, LFO 1 and 2 are mapped to the mix of AC and BD respectively. So LFO 1 is taking care of the north-south mixing. And LFO 2 does in addition, LFO 2 is also mapped to the cutoff, the filter cutoff, so it's going to basically brighten the sound according to this period here. But the problem is that both of the amounts of the LFOs are negligible. They're not really doing anything. We bring them in with the modulation wheel. So the mod wheel is engaged for both LFO 1 amount and LFO 2 amount. So if I turn the modulation wheel all the way down and after we're through the filter cutoff, filter envelope, that's the sound. If I now increase the modulation wheel to maximum, play the same note, we settle out a different sound. So that's like it's all dull because we're not introducing the cutoff. I'll bring some cutoff back in. Okay, so that's the LFOs in action and also the modulation wheel. Modulation wheel operates the LFOs. Just a word of a note on the LFOs. The LFO 1 is very, very slow indeed, so that's an exceptionally slow sweep. And LFO 2 is pretty nippy, so that's like hammering backwards and forwards between A and C. We can isolate them. Turn LFO 1 all the way off, LFO 2 all the way up. There it is. And LFO 1 on its own. It's going to take a very long time indeed. There it is. So we get both of those effects simultaneously when we increase the modulation wheel. You get a tiny, tiny amount of it without the modulation wheel, like really, but you know, it's mostly coming from the wheel. Now the next row down in the modulation matrix we haven't actually touched on in any of the previous videos. It's Aftertouch. So this pressure value here, which is tied to an awful lot of stuff, if you've got Aftertouch on your keyboard, you'll get that. So no Aftertouch, here it comes. So the more Aftertouch I engage as I press through, I don't know if you've got Aftertouch on your keyboard, it's something that I don't use very often, but you basically get an extra range on your key, where if you press into this kind of spongy effect, then you get an additional modulation source. And we've got all of these different things. You can really clearly hear the pan as it sweeps over to my right ear. LFO2 amount, and then we're brightening the sound with the cutoff and doing an additional mix from AB across to CD. Then we've got velocity sensitivity on the filter envelope. So softly played note. So that's introducing, as I hit the key harder, it's introducing more of the filter envelope, and of course we've seen the filter envelope starts off very intense, so we start with a really, really bright sound and then cut away and return to our sustain level, but with less envelope amount that entire effect is suppressed. As if that's not enough sources operating on the filter cutoff, we've also got some keyboard. Now bear in mind this value is also very, very small, so this effect by default isn't actually on. High key, and if I increase this to maximum, not only are we going to get a much steeper key follow on the cutoff, giving really, really intense peaks up at the top, but we're also going to do some pretty extreme panning. Fantastic. But by default, what's the value actually on the, yeah, essentially nothing. 1/20th is basically nothing. Now that's all the modulation sources, but we're not done yet. There's still more interest to be gleaned out of this sound. So we've got unison and legato effects on here. We have a 5-voice polyphony in unison mode. So everything that you're hearing is 5 voices being combined with an intense detune. So if I take that detune out, you'll hear how dramatic it is. So it's having a very significant effect on the sound, obviously, because the voices are being spread so far apart that you're getting really intense colour on the frequencies. And we've also got legato, which basically means the envelopes are being suppressed if you play legato. So I'm going to speed up that filter envelope cutoff so that we can hear it more distinctly. Legato, you don't get the filter envelope. We've also got glide. This is full glide mode, not legato mode, so I don't even have to hold 2 keys down simultaneously. I'll just make the time a little longer. Okay, let go of all the keys, and then it glides up to the next note. I've made so many changes to this sound, I'll just throw it away and get back to the bass sound. Don't have any chorus or delay. We have a very interesting effect on the pan setting, because you might think, well, it's a mono sound, what do we care about pan? Well, there are 5 voices, so each of the voices is panned. So that's part of the effect that we're hearing. The voices are appearing at different points in the stereo spectrum. I think that's really cool. And finally, just a quick mention of the filter settings themselves. So we can see that we've got a very small envelope amount because we have additional modulation of the envelope amount from the velocity key. So it's the combination of those two things that's really kind of unleashing the full range. But if you play very quietly on your keyboard, then everything is dull. It's only when you play louder because of the velocity setting, and that's just at 0.354. If we kind of make that maximum, then you get the full range of the envelope. I think the real takeaway for me from this sound is the number of different effects that are applied to the Vector joystick, because the combination of them all, your manual control that you've always got, the mixer envelope applying dynamic modulation, LFO 1 and 2 being tied via the modulation wheel to further modulation, and then Aftertouch introducing its own complexity as well, basically means no two notes that you play ever sound the same. You get a really interesting dynamic synthesizer every time you touch a key. You hardly know what you're gonna get. Hold the keys down, you get a brand new interesting thing. Really fantastic stuff, brilliant sound design. Hope you enjoyed this, found it useful, and if you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications, and then you'll find when my other content comes out. And I hope to see you then. Thanks very much.